what is happening in Niger Republic today is also has a populist appeal. Okay, it has a populist appeal. Personally, as a writer, I always try to align myself with the position of the people. Okay, now.
Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pan-African Review. My name is Mahatma Ulimwengu, and today we have a great guest for you. This is your online spot for African discourse, of course, and I will be shortly joined by Chikodiri, and I want to make sure that I pronounce his last name correctly. Chikodiri Nwangwu, who is a prolific writer, researcher, scholar, PhD, and he deals with political science issues and African affairs, and he's going to enlighten us as to some of the ongoings, especially the situation in Niger. He's got some opinions that he wants to share. So yeah, I hope you guys will enjoy it and let us know what you think. Be sure to check out the panafricanreview.com. We got all the IG, Twitter, all the links in the description. So yeah, check us out, guys. And we will be back with the doctor himself.
Hello, good afternoon, Mahatma.
Yes, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for taking the time.
How is East Africa today?
It's good. It's all good. It's I'm not sure if you can see me, but I am absolutely boiling here. I think the summer is back here in Dar es Salaam, so yeah, we're living though. How's Nigeria? You said you're in Nigeria, right?
I work. My organization is based in. I'm a Nigerian, and I also work in Nigeria. So I work with. I'm an academic staff attached to the University of Nigeria in Nsukka.
Yeah, we wanted to get your learned opinion on obviously some of the developments happening there in East Africa. And obviously in Nigeria, there's a situation in Niger that's gaining tension as the days go. So let's talk about your article you recently published on the 9th of August saying ECOWAS must rule out military intervention in Niger. So what are some of your main concerns regarding such an action, as in military intervention?
Okay, thank you so very much. As we well know, ECOWAS stands for the Economic Community of West African States.
Yes.
It is a regional economic cooperation and integration bloc, one of the RECs within the larger umbrella of the African Union. Of course, besides the ECOWAS, we have other RECs in Africa, like SADC, we have COMESA, we have IGAD, we have ECAS, and so on and so forth. So these are traditionally founded to pursue an economic integration and economic cooperation agenda. But over time, we've also seen that they've expanded their mandate to accommodate other issues that border on peace building, that border on election management, election observation, other issues that, that go beyond the realm of their traditional mandate of providing economic cooperation, enhancing economic cooperation and integration. So ECOWAS over the years have maintained this posture, deriving expressly from its various protocols. One of the or two of the most outstanding protocols border on what it calls the ECOWAS mechanism. The ECOWAS mechanism, and then the other one is the ECOWAS supplementary protocol. So the supplementary protocol was more or less a sequel to the ECOWAS mechanism. So the ECOWAS mechanism primarily targets ECOWAS member states that are riddled with conflict, with terrorism, with other issues that border on conflict and conflict resolution. So that mechanism is designed to ensure that such conflicts are resolved through the instrumentality of the ECOWAS, such that even if it warrants a military intervention, that it is justified. Okay. It also mentions in categorical terms that within the member states of ECOWAS, that anything that has to do with military intervention should not be allowed. In other words, it maintains a kind of zero tolerance to military intervention. So but the protocol that expressly talks about democracy, governance, and other related issues has to do with the supplementary protocol. And in that supplementary protocol, there is no mention anywhere in the protocol that military intervention should be considered as an option for the restoration of constitutional order in a member state that is bedeviled by military incursion, So in Niger Republic, something happened the last month, and that was the overthrow of the President Bazoum, by the military, some military leaders led by General Chani.
Yeah.
So ECOWAS in line with its traditional mandate of maintaining or observing a zero tolerance for power acquired through unconstitutional means, quickly mobilized its member nations and started working out a modality through which the Nigerian crisis could be resolved. And even if it warrants a military intervention, that would now come as a last resort. So, but in my article, I tried to make a case against a military intervention for so many reasons. In as much as it is partly captured in the protocol, in the ECOWAS mechanism.
But can I just say on that note though, because I did want to almost play the devil's advocate for the opposing view that you're espousing right now. Last year in November, you also published an article titled "Lessons from the ECOWAS Intervention in the Gambia," in which you said that, you said the ECOWAS has transcended its traditional mandate of promoting economic cooperation and integration to peace building, conflict transformation, and security provisioning within the past 3 decades. So, how would you say that the situation in Niger differs from that in Gambia in that military intervention?
Okay, very beautiful. Now, these are two different scenarios because many people have tried to model things up that if ECOWAS could intervene in the Gambia, if ECOWAS could intervene in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, in Ivory Coast, and so in Guinea, and so on and so forth, what should now stop ECOWAS from intervening in Niger Republic? These are different issues, although it amounts to a negation of the doctrine or the principle of territorial integrity in all these cases. But one thing that stood out was that humanitarianism, the pursuit of humanitarianism, was able to trump the idea of territorial integrity. But beyond the issue of...
So just on that point quickly, because you said collective security trumps the principle of territorial integrity. Do you think since what has happened in Niger, do you think those have switched in terms of territorial integrity is more important than collective security now?
Well, I was still driving at a certain point. The point I'm making in essence is that the dynamics are not the same. The causal factors behind the present political situation in Niger and other cases where ECOWAS intervened are quite different. In the case of Gambia, Gambia was a case of a election outcome which the outgoing president acknowledged as being credible and even went as far as congratulating the newly elected president, that is Adama Barrow. Okay, he congratulated him, but after some days, he now reneged and withdrew his congratulatory message and wanted to stay put against the popular wish of the people. So that was an action that was targeted primarily against the people. And if you watch very closely, there was no alliance building in support of the action that guaranteeing his continued stay in power. So it was a clear violation of established a constitutional order and against the mandate of the people. Then second and most importantly, what is happening in Niger Republic today is also has a populist appeal. Okay, it has a populist appeal. Personally, as a writer, I always try to align myself with the position of the people. Okay,
Right.
now, if you look at what is happening in Niger Republic, it goes beyond the mere military intervention. It is actually a continuation of the ongoing struggle against the Western domination of African nations. It is an extension of the ongoing struggle against imperialism and the neo-colonialism. Because it is not just about Niger Republic. Within the past 2 years or thereabout, there has been a progressive increase in anti-French sentiments within West Africa. There has been a progressive increase in anti-West sentiments within the zone. It happened in Burkina Faso, it happened in Mali, it happened in Guinea, and these are all member states of ECOWAS that were colonized by France. In other words, they are Francophone ECOWAS member states. And this kind of resistance or this kind of a struggle against what they perceived as a subtle means of reinventing the memories of colonial days through different ways, whether subtle or manifest means, should not be allowed to continue. So that was what led to the coup in some of these African countries, and now it has snowballed into another country called Niger Republic. So
Yes.
it is not just a struggle or a fight against the person of the ousted President Bazoum. It is indeed a struggle against the Western imperial order led by France and the United States. But in the case of Gambia, we noticed that there was no foreign interest, at least none was made manifest. The US, France, or British government that was obviously the former colonial master of the Gambia was not even interested. So it was purely an internal affair between the country and the ECOWAS as a sub-region. And the ECOWAS saw the need to intervene in order to ward off any form of humanitarian situation that might arise if the problem was allowed to escalate. But in this case now, these are the people of Niger Republic are strongly behind the military leaders led by General Chani. Okay, that is one. Then number two, the struggle is not just against the person of the ousted president, who was obviously a pro-Western president, but it is a struggle for the total independence of Niger as a country.
On that note, I was just piggybacking off your points. I was asking, given the complex and intricate nature of African politics, with heavy influence from Western powers and financial interests, is it feasible to attain restorative governance on African soil? And I'm speaking of this as in people look at these Western powers like America, France, who are the UK, all these countries that meddle in African affairs, thinking they are the dominant bullies. However, if you look at the multinational corporations that fund most of the politicians in these countries, you'd understand that they are really in charge. So given all these financial interests, like playing part in every single African country, is it feasible to attain restorative governance in Africa?
Okay. Yeah, it's indeed a difficult task. And that's why if you go back to the independence of Africa, starting with Ghana, which was the first Black African country to gain its independence in 1957 with President Kwame Nkrumah as the leader of that government. Now, one of the things that he realized was the need to promote African unity.
Yeah,
okay?
Africa must unite.
That was, yes, Africa must unite. And in the light of that, of course, arising from the arguments of Karl Marx and other that the workers of all nations must unite because you have nothing to lose except your chains. So he now brought it to the African domain that it is only through unity that Africa will be able to maintain a monolithic position, maintain a common ground within the international community, and will also be able to ward off the preponderance of influence that comes from these foreign powers, maybe through their multinational corporations or through the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States and other notable power instruments through which they topple or undermine or instigate crisis within the African nations. So there is no doubt it is a very difficult task. Like if you look at virtually every part of Africa, these people have, these foreign powers have refused to yield to the demands and to the well-being and to the aspirations of the ordinary members of the community. Okay? In the case of this is much more pronounced in Francophone countries. And the reasons are not far-fetched, because if you look at the nature of colonial rule that existed in these Francophone countries, it was quite different from what was experimented in Anglophone countries. In Francophone countries, they saw Africa as an extension of French territory. In other words, they saw their colonial territories in Africa and elsewhere as nothing but an extension of French territory. So they started with what they call policy of assimilation. So they wanted to build a French man out of an African.
Right.
And even after independence from 1960s and all that, they continue to maintain some degree of control over economic, over political, and other related issues. So the point is that it is a difficult thing. We must acknowledge that. It is indeed a difficult thing, and that is largely because of the structure of the global political economy, because they fight through some of these multilateral institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, WTO. Those are instruments in the hands of the imperial masters to maintain an existing order that is largely favorable to them. Okay, and they are not going to budge anytime soon. And if you look at what is happening in Niger Republic, for instance, the gathering of interest from France, from US, from Britain, and their allies, you will understand that it is a desperate measure in order to retain an influence within the country and indeed within the within the Saharan belt. Okay. Obviously for strategic economic reasons, obviously for political reasons, and what have you. But one thing I know for sure is that if African countries stay united, if they refuse to pander to the wishes of their neo-imperial masters, maybe through their carrots, through their loans, through their so-called aids, and other handouts that comes every now and then, if they maintain a common ground and they pursue a goal and objective that would ultimately advance the well-being of their people, I believe that they will continue to maintain a strong opposition against whatever interest that the West wants to achieve within the member states of these countries, or they will also be able to secure the mandate and the support of the people, even when Western authorities and powers are against their leaders. Like what is happening in Niger today. Okay, we see a people army, we see a people that are extremely motivated to stand by the new military government, regardless of what the foreign powers, the US, the France, ECOWAS, and the rest of them are saying. So that's what happens in a situation whereby there is legitimacy, whereby there is ownership of ownership of the prevailing order or governance system within a country. But when the government begins to distance itself from the people, when there is a disconnection, when there is a kind of alienation between the leadership and the people, then it will ultimately even promote any form of revolution. And it will be much easier for the foreign powers to use the people or other opposing forces within the territories of those countries that are of interest to them to instigate violence, to instigate uproar, to instigate uprising, and so on and so forth.
Right. Okay. Well, on the Niger subject with General Chiani, he recently promised a 3-year transition of power. I was curious to get your take on this. Do you think his pledge, first of all, is sincere, and is it a reasonable timeline?
Well, one thing that is common amongst many military leaders, whether in Nigeria during the heydays of military rule or in any other country for that matter, is that once they come into power, they will begin by rolling out a transition program. And the transition programs are usually not something that is achieved overnight. Even in Chad, recently the former leader of Chad died. That is, what's his name? So recently he passed on. I don't know. Okay, so the son took over as the new president. And the moment he assumed office, one of the things he did in order to
Idris Deby, right?
Yeah, Idris Deby, that's correct. Idris Deby. So the moment he died, his son assumed office as a military leader. There was no election, there was no proper handover, but it was just by military action. So he assumed the office, and there was mass resistance from the people of Chad. But one thing he did in order to endear himself, or at least to reduce the opposition, to reduce the force of the opposition within the country, was that he rolled out a transition program, promising to conduct election within so and so period and all that. But up till now, nothing has been achieved in that regard. So the point I'm making is that this kind of promise is not peculiar to the Nigerian new military government. It is an established tradition across different countries where there have been a military incursion. So, but one thing that makes the case of Niger quite different is that we must begin to look at it beyond the fact that an incumbent an incumbent president that was elected via election was toppled. We have to look beyond that simplistic and the commonsensical narrative and begin to look at it from a broader perspective that captures the struggle for democracy, which these military coupists also represent in their action, because democracy in itself is not ultimately reducible to elections.
Yes.
Unlike what the Western liberal narrative would have us believe. Because for them, everything has been ultimately reduced to periodic, regular elections and other. But the issues that border on poverty, the issues that border on ignorance, diseases, and what have you, are often neglected, if not completely abandoned. But yet, they are espousing democracy. So with respect to Niger, I think it will be important to allow the new government led by General Chani substantial amount of time to consolidate on the decolonization struggle that he is waging against the French government and indeed the Western authorities at large. So it's not something that has to be rushed into regardless of the threat of the ECOWAS and the Western powers.
Yeah, that's. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I think you touched on a very important point, especially when you're dealing with African nations. There was a democracy summit in Arusha a month or so ago, and we were having these discussions as do Africans want democracy as is defined by these Western superpowers, where periodic elections, where it's riddled with corruption, where money speaks, and especially in Africa, there's no way of holding anyone accountable? Or do they want the democracy in the sense of it is the will of the people? What do the people want? Oh, we want good roads and clean food and clean water, and we want a decent job and provide for our families. So if you can be sincere about your because obviously there's the politics angle of it. Everyone has that, and anyone in the political arena is ambitious enough, so they want to have a say as to what's going down. So I'm curious to see in the coming months and years just how General Chiani is going to conduct himself in terms of not just paving a way for elections per se, but how he actually is going to govern. Because that's the one thing, you want to take over, you actually have some responsibilities, and you have to make sure that your people's needs are at least somewhat attended to.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you. Because it's one thing to assume power, and it's another thing to use power in the overriding interest of the people.
Mm,
Many people that have, of course, one of the easiest thing to do as a coupist is to, I mean, one of the easiest justification to come up with is to just discredit the government that has been toppled.
right.
It is very easy.
It's
Either
very.
you either you call them corrupt, or you call, I mean, there are so many reasons that can easily be hung on the neck of the of any toppled government. So one thing is to assume power, another thing is to use power to achieve an overriding objective that would benefit the generality of the people. And that has not always been the case in many parts of Africa where there has been a military intervention. But given the level of populist appeal that military incursion, the Nigerian military incursion has elicited over time, I believe the government might not just allow such a appeal and the popularity to just evaporate. Now, what Africa needs, to the best of my knowledge, has little or nothing to do with periodic elections, regular elections, and what have you. And in any case, these are part of the conditionalities that the Western imperial powers have continued to impose on African countries and some other non-African countries that are still under the apron string of
Mm,
the Western authorities. Okay. Now,
yeah.
the moment you approach them for a loan facility, this constitutes part of the conditionalities that one, you must liberalize.
Yeah.
And there's still liberalization both from political standpoint and from economic angle. Politically speaking, you must conduct elections. You must hold elections that will promise to provide a counterpart funding through the so-called development partners, okay? Their embassies, their organizations, and what have you. That will provide some part of the funding that will help in conducting the elections. And in most cases, it offers them the opportunity to impose or to support a candidate that would dance to their tune and serve as an eye for them within the country. So the
Yes.
point being made is that election in itself is not equal to democracy. As a matter of fact, election is just an infinitesimal fraction, a fragment of what constitutes a democracy. And the hypocrisy of the West have continued to loom large in Africa because they try to dissociate themselves from any country that is not practicing democracy in quotes. But the same Western authorities have continued to embrace many countries, especially within the Middle East, that are openly against their own definition of democracy. Saudi Arabia, for instance, makes no pretense about practicing their own version of democracy. Yet, it has remained one of the long-lasting allies of the United States of America. So what an average African wants is a system that offers him the opportunity to express himself whenever the need arises within the remit of what is permitted by the existing rules and regulation. What an African wants is a system that would promote the alleviation of poverty. There is poverty in Africa. What an African wants is a system that will promote the expansion of knowledge frontiers, dealing with ignorance through education, provision of health care, and other basic social services. Many Africans are not interested in the uniform that is worn by their national leader, whether he is wearing agbada. Agbada is a Nigerian a uniquely Nigerian attire, or whether he is wearing khaki. Khaki is a military uniform. Okay, so the uniform the national leader wears makes little or no difference. But what matters is the provision of basic infrastructure, basic social services that would promote lives and livelihood. And that, to me, should be the ultimate basis for reckoning what democracy is and what it is not.
Yeah, certainly. I think you summed it up very nicely there. And I see we're running out of time here a bit, but I really appreciate our conversation today. And thank you once more for taking your time out to discuss with me on this. And plus, you've given me a lot to think about. And I've been trying to do my own research, trying to get involved in African affairs. But I think the more pronounced we have these conversations and the louder and more, when you're talking about that, the Western hypocrisy, it's only ever discussed in scholarly circles, in academia or political discussions. But everyone else is sort of just going on about their day because that money influence and the military power, it really does have a hold on us. And that's when you were talking about what Africans want and basic standard of life, just an honorable and life with dignity, a family you can love and raise. But there are so many external factors and internal within ourselves that we still need to conquer. And I feel like this is just the start of many conversations we'll be having about this. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Well, thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Nice speaking with you.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts? Got about 2 minutes left here.
Okay. On a final note, one thing we must continue to espouse is that Africans must continue to speak with one voice. A situation whereby an African country is invaded by other member states within the same bloc under the umbrella body of the ECOWAS or through the promptings of the external powers like the West, France, and the rest of them should not be tolerated, because that can only give justification to what had historically happened in Africa, whereby foreign powers continue to invade African territories. I think the last time this happened was in 2011, when NATO forces invaded Libya.
Yeah.
Okay, so if this is allowed to happen, it can only embolden these external powers to continue to intervene in the internal affairs of African nations. So for me, ECOWAS should continue to explore every diplomatic opportunity in order to ensure that peace and stability is duly restored in Niger Republic and other troubled member states.
All right. Thank you very much, Doctor, Professor. And hopefully, I would like to talk to you about Nigerian affairs in the coming weeks if you're interested. I've been reading up a lot about this, but I wanted to keep this, mostly focused on Niger. But I really appreciate your work, and I'll be reading a lot more of it. So I hope you're all good and safe and healthy there. You said you're in Lagos, right?
No, I'm in Enugu State.
Enugu State, my bad.
Yeah, Enugu State. It's in eastern part of
Nigeria.
Nigeria.
I need to make a pilgrimage there.
Yeah, I've been to Kenya. I was in Kenya in 2019. I stopped at my first stop was in Ethiopia, via Ethiopia Airlines, then to Kenya, Nairobi for about 3 days. That was the only time I've been to East Africa.
Well, you're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Right. Thank you so much, and
right.
have a good weekend.
All right, dear. Thank you so much. You too.
All right. Cheers.
Regards to everyone. Yeah, bye.